Tell me about your childhood.
It's fucked up.
How many people do we know that don't tell the truth? How many people are hiding this in their families right now? So Terry, my daughter, is like this now. And I said, don't be embarrassed. It's a chemical imbalance.
Right.
Yeah. Are you ashamed because your mother has diabetes? No. Are you ashamed because your daddy has high blood pressure? No.
Why do you think she relapsed so many times?
I think some of it was the treatment, how they treated schizophrenia at the time. Culturally, black folks either thought you could pray your way through anything, and we did not, as a culture, deal well with mental health. When we had, the phrase at that time was, that's my crazy cousin or that's my crazy uncle, and we would kind of keep them in the back room and only let them out to eat.
Because it hurts, and people don't want to talk about it. And you don't know how to get help. There is help out there. And see, the thing is that people kill me. We came from a time where they told you to pray. Where they took mama into places and put oil on her. And said there's a demon in her. You need to come out of her. And then they said there was something that you did in your life. And there was nothing that she did in her life. And you made me hate church at the time of that. When you don't know nothing, then you say stupid things.
But nobody was prepared to really deal with mental health.
From humble beginnings out of Iowa, you wouldn't know this woman would have a tumultuous life, full of great triumphs and horrible defeats. A life, as you soon will witness, will take us on a journey of unimaginative proportions. Born in Madrid, Iowa, she was the fourth child out of 9 children from Pauline and Joseph Wesley. There was Ruby, John, Mildred, Mary, Joseph, Marvin, Evelyn, and Velma. In the 1920s and 30s, coal was one of the top 3 industries, along with agricultural and manufacturing in Iowa, that was growing at a rapid pace. And so the family would move to Granger, Iowa, and live on one of the coal mining camps while Grandpa worked the mines.
And the camp was owned by the farmers around there that built these houses. And also the school that we started to was named Snyder School. And it was only half a mile down the road. And we went there till we went through the 8th grade. Then we went on to Granger for high school.
There was plenty of mouths to feed in the Wesley home. And because Grandpa would be gone working long hours at the mines, she would be left alone to take care of the home and the children. Grandma Pauline had a friend by the name of Mrs. Minnie Moore, who was married but only had 1 child. They moved from Franklin, Kansas to work the mines. Mrs. Moore saw how Grandma Pauline was overwhelmed with everything, that she volunteered to help, but it wasn't help with the housework. She volunteered to take some of the children and help raise them.
All of your life. How did your mom feel about that?
Mom just accepted it.
Wow.
But because Mom said Miss Moore moved in the camp when Gladys was 6 months old. And Mom had us kids just like stair steps. And she said Miss Moore used to come down and take the baby, which was Gladys, and keep her in the afternoon. And said she'd come every day and take Gladys to her house and keep her, because she didn't have any children. She had a growing son, but she never had any children, no children. And she would keep her all day till just before Daddy come home, and she'd get Gladys back to the house. And so when Gladys started the school, Miss Moore had brought her school clothes and everything. Gladys would eat her breakfast and leave our house and go to Miss Moore's to dress for school. And so she would go to school, the country school all day, and then come home, stop by Miss Moore's, change into her play clothes, then come to our house.
And from that moment on, Mrs. Moore would have such an instrumental part that influenced Mom for the rest of her life. It makes you wonder, because of the two sets of parents, two sets of rules, two very different households, and being treated differently from the other siblings, if this was the precursor to set off Mom's bipolar illness. Mrs. Moore was a very religious and cultured person. She introduced the young Wesley girls to Sunday school and church. She was an accomplished vocalist and taught the oldest girls how to sing in their proper singing voices. The sisters were so good, they formed a singing group called the Wesley Sisters. It was Ruby, Mildred, Mary, and Gladys. They would sing in competitions, in the 4-state conventions, and many church functions.
But she trained us to sing.
Wow.
In the camp there, and she would train us in our voices, because she said, "You've got a high voice, Mildred. You're a tenor," and she'd get up there with me and show me my part. And Ruby was the first soprano, Mary second, and Glass was alto. And she'd get in all these voices to show us, and then she'd have us all sing together.
All of the Wesley girls played basketball for Granger High School. Mom was an exceptional player and would be named all-conference in the Jack North column, a columnist for the Des Moines
But
Register.
Glass was so quick. And in those days, if you had skills and were real good at them, your name was found in the Jack North column. And Gladys made it.
Wow.
I didn't, but Gladys did make it. And because she was such a fantastic guard, she was so quick.
Mom graduated Pittsburgh State Teachers College in 1954 and moved to the big city of Des Moines.
We met at Old West High School, was called then. It's up by where Methodist Hospital is now. And they had a meeting where all of the new teachers and all of the teachers would come. And that's when and how I met her. And so we just talked and everything, and she was telling me that she'd come from Kansas, and she was telling me how she had gotten to school in Kansas and her sponsor. And my situation was similar because I had gone to a school with 600 white girls and me.
She started her first teaching job at Oak Park Elementary. What a great accomplishment, being a young, black, educated woman with your whole life ahead of you. She was new to Des Moines, a new job, a new car, and an apartment. She was on top of the world, defying the status quo of that era, which was to graduate high school, marry, and start a family. Life was good for Mom and getting better.
We went to the Wilkie House. The Wilkie House was, at that time, was truly a community center. And so they had activities and things going on over there, At that time here in Des Moines, the older women had a lot of service clubs and things like that. And they were always trying to get us to join their clubs so they could keep their clubs alive, And so we'd be at this tea and we'd be at this function. And we went to parties with fancy dresses. I mean, we had foolishness.
Yes.
We had good time. But Des Moines doesn't seem to have that kind of culture now, but we had a lot of, I joined the AKAs as she joined the Deltas. We were joined as graduate students.
Oh, okay.
See, we were not undergraduate students, so we didn't go through all that mess. We went through enough mess.
She started a second contract at Sabin Elementary. While there, she started to work on her Master's of Education at Drake University. In 1958, at a Christmas party, she would meet the man of her dreams. He stood 6'3", muscular build, very easy on the eyes, as Mom put it, a Southern boy. His name was Clenard Wagner.
But I remember her talking about this guy. She was so excited. She was getting married. She was going with this guy. And then we called him Clenard. But old Clenard, yeah. And I thought, wow. I said, well, he's handsome, it's all right. He joked and everything, and I said, oh, that's a good marriage. Well, when she got married, met Clenard, and was planning her wedding and everything, she bought everything for me so I could be in her wedding. Dress, shoes, everything.
The two married in 1959. The following year, she would take a new teaching contract at Wallace Elementary. And in the spring of the same year, the couple gave birth to their first child, a son, Tyree Wagner. 2 years later, the second child would be born, Jason Rutledge. Tell me about your childhood.
Oh, let's see. My first memories of my childhood is when I was about 3 years old, and Mom brought home my little brother. We lived in the apartment on, was it 16th? 18th. And I remember that he cried a lot. I remember after about the second day, I asked Mom to take him back where she got him, because nobody could get no sleep in the house. But then after that, I had a pretty good childhood. We lived in the apartment, me, Jason, Mom, and Dad. Mom was a school teacher. Dad worked at a place called Eagle Iron, who's a welder. We were middle class, or at that time, upper middle class.
Mom taught at Wallace from 1960 until 1966, and then she started a new contract at Byrd Elementary. The family had it all, and it was getting better. But a storm was brewing that would turn this American dream into a tragic story. There were rumors that Dad was having extramarital affairs. She was very suspicious of Dad and his actions. Her suspicions began to increase, and the stress of that seeped into her career and home life. It was getting too much for her to bear. And in that era, there were no social support, no outreach agencies for Mom to seek help. So with no help, the stress began to depress her. Now, do you remember Mom getting sick at all? Do you remember that era?
Yes, I do. And I remember Charlotte, my friend Charlotte Parks. Well, Charlotte Jones she was, because she hadn't got married then yet, not yet. She owned the apartment house where your parents lived. And she said, I'm really concerned. And I said, what? She said, Gladys is just not acting right. And I said, what's wrong? She said, I don't know. I said, have you talked to her lately? He said, why don't you come and visit? So I did. I went to visit her a couple of times, and I thought, this is not working out. This is not working at all. And she was really upset about having kids, and she was extremely upset about having kids and having to do this and having to do that. And she just got overwhelmed with the responsibilities that came her way. And she was responsible for the kids. She was trying to do a teaching job, and she was really particular about her teaching, and so she was trying to do a really, a neat job there. And most of all, she didn't have a support system to help her.
Dad was doing his thing.
And she just got overwhelmed with the whole thing, and she just said, one day she said, I don't want these kids. And I go like, girl, you got these kids, you better be taking care of them. She goes, all I had. But, it was just, she wanted certain things for you guys. She wanted certain things here. She wanted certain things there. She had, a house to take care of, and it was just too much. She just couldn't deal with it.
Would you think she was depressed at that time?
She was very frustrated, and I think her frustration turned into a depression because she was so frustrated at not being able to do what she wanted to do the way she wanted to do it.
But life went on as usual. She knew how to hide the pain and how to continue to live, like we women do. Fake it until you make it.
And shortly after that, we moved to Amherst. And we moved to Amherst when I was about 6. and I started school at Findlay. Jason wasn't going to school, and there it was just like Leave It to Beaver. You know, two boys, and mom and dad. Dad worked, came home, played with us. He also fixed bikes for the neighborhood. And, you know, it was normal. We had big giant Christmases. I mean, huge Christmases. I know my brother doesn't think we were spoiled. We were spoiled.
Spoiled? No, because we didn't know how to share. We didn't have tantrums. You know, we didn't get what we wanted when we wanted it. We had a lot of stuff, though. I remember my brother and I Tyree and I had a matching bedroom set with dressers and fire engine sheets. And it was really, the room was really nice. We had what's called a Viewmaster. It looked like a little 12-inch television with a record player on top. And on the side, it had this like a foot long, maybe 12, 15 inch long film strip that was in the shape of an L. And you would put the film strip in the side and then put it on, and the pictures would change with a cue, a little beep. The picture would change and it would tell you the story of the pictures. We had stuff like that. We had this thing called a thing maker. We had, I remember the summer we got World Book encyclopedias and Childcraft. That was real exciting. We had so many books.
Severely depressed, she started talking to herself. She neglected the family and became very religious, in which all would be very disturbing to Dad. He didn't know how to deal with the depression or how to get help. The only help Dad knew was Mom's sister, Mildred. So on a cold, wintry day in January 1966, Dad took Mom and baby Jason to visit her sister, Mildred, with hopes that she could get Mom to settle down.
She was at my house because she was just so disoriented. And I remember I kept her at the house, and then all at once, she had Jason in her arms. She just broke out of that house and she said, I'm going to jump in the river. And I didn't believe her. I said, I don't think she'll go jump in the river. But I couldn't stop her. She went right up 12th Street. She turned, went down University, and by that time, everything come, and I told him. And he got Cunard, and he said she was on her way down to that university.
Aunt Mildred looked frantically through the house and the neighborhood, but the pair could not be found. Aunt Mildred summoned her husband and her sisters, and all headed to the river to see if Mom had made good on her promise. They spotted the pair on the bridge of 2nd Avenue, and the family panicked. The family would be able to talk Mom down from the bridge. She would be evaluated and diagnosed as having psychotic depression.
Yes. Because I remember I cried for days. I didn't think she'd ever come back.
This began a series of electric shock treatments, and she was also prescribed the so-called wonder drug, Thorazine. Electric shock treatments was first introduced in American hospitals to treat the mentally ill in 1947, but was discovered by Hugo Cerletti and Lucio Bini in Rome in 1937. The idea to use ECT in humans came first to him after he noticed the tranquilizing effect a shock to the temples had on pigs before they were slaughtered. How it works. Shock works like an antidepressant medication, changing the way the brain receptors receive important mood-related chemicals, such as serotonin, dopamine, and norepinephrine. The treatment isn't without problems. It can impair memory and cause confusion. Patients who undergo ECT often relapse and require further courses to maintain their moods. Thorazine was introduced in 1954 for patients with schizophrenia. It flooded the state mental hospitals. This was the first effective antipsychotic medication that received a major impetus, and 10 years later, with the enactment of the federal Medicaid and Medicare. This drug was affectionately known as the wonder drug, causing a calming effect, or some would say a zombie, mind-dulling effect in patients. This drug almost single-handedly helped in the deinstitutionalization in America. This was a policy that moved the severely mentally ill out of large state institutions into the mainstream, and then closing part or all of those institutions. The magnitude qualifies as one of the largest social experiments in American history.
When she was going through a lot of problems, and there was the psychologists and stuff, when she went back for some kind of special education after she was teaching a while. And she passed it and she got a good grade in it. But the psychologist said that he saw things in her that he was shocked that she could go through the stages she was in and make the grade that she did.
Wow.
Yes, because he really said that, because he saw signs in her. And then when he saw her history, he says, I see the problem. And he saw the problem by her between two mothers, two homes.
Two sets of rules.
That's right.
Mm-hmm.
Two. That's
Bipolar.
Right. Yes, it really was.
Mm-hmm.
Just what she went through. That's just what it was.
With both treatments, Mom makes significant improvement and returned to her life as a mother, a wife, and an educator. And in 1968, the couple would be blessed with their third child, Bobby Jean. Also in 1968, Mom would suffer personal losses, one right after another, not only dealing with the depression before, but postpartum depression. She would face the unexpected deaths of both parents 6 weeks apart, and in between those deaths was the death of her mother-in-law. Mom would stop taking her medicine and would be severely depressed. She would be committed once again. The family lost their Spanish stucco home and had to move into a 2-bedroom apartment on top of...
We moved to 1309 Forest Avenue.
Okay, that apartment.
That apartment was upstairs. It was on top of a barbershop next to a grocery store. It's set on top of a barbershop between a grocery store called Greiger's, which is now a church, and a nightclub.
Why'd you move there? Why not to another house? What was going on?
Well, Mom had gotten sick. Dad hadn't paid the mortgage, and just our life that's when things start falling apart. Total different SES, social economic structure or status. It was just totally different. I wasn't used to folks who didn't work. I didn't know anything about welfare or ADC. I didn't know anything. It was a school. The first day I got there, I basically we had to fight. Kids fought each other, black kids fought each other, black kids fought the white kids fought the black kids, we fought. I didn't know, when I lived on Forest Avenue, I learned what drunks were, not the kind that you see on TV like Otis from Mayberry, but just hardcore alcoholics, guys that drank more, did more drinking than working. Women who got drunk. I'd never seen a drunk woman until I lived there. Never seen scary people. It was really different for us to move from a house where...
Mom would be released from the hospital. She remained stable long enough for the family to move again to another house, 1525 Sampson. She so desperately tried to maintain, to be stable, and tried to enjoy all that she worked for. But the outside stimulus, such as Dad's cheating, the abuse, physical and verbal, that in 1970, Mom would be committed again, and this time it didn't seem she would ever return.
A brand new complex that they built on the east side of Des Moines. 235 houses meant that the rent was the house note was $235 a month, and it was made for low-income people or people starting out to buy houses, first home buyers. So we moved into there because Daddy always had a good job. I think Mom was back and forth trying to teach, but Dad had already had been messing up. He already had another woman at the time when we moved into that. Eventually married, ended up having 2 kids by. But by the time we got over to Samson, it just never was, never the same. We tried to make it into a Christmas. I remember one time Dad put up lights and stuff. But once again, Mom was back and forth at the hospital. About every 3 or 4 months, she was in the hospital. And we go to an area from an area on the west side where you're fighting all the time. And you're going to an area that's not much better. They just got a break and got into a house. Mm-hmm. We came the opposite way. We came from having everything from going down and then trying to climb back out. And we're going into kids who were going from one level to the next. So living on the east side wasn't much fun for me because I fought a lot. Mm-hmm. People made fun of us. Or they make fun of Mom because Mom would be talking all the time. Or she'd walk down the street talking to herself. So kids are cruel and they used to make fun of us. But never really cared too much for the east side. But at that point, we lost everything.
Dad tried to keep things together, but before we knew it, Mom was gone. We were sitting in the house with, sometimes we had lights, sometimes we didn't. And then one Easter weekend, Dad took us over to Uncle Everett's church on 14th and University. For a while, we went and stayed with my Aunt Ruby and Uncle Merle. And then we moved. Pat Johnson was one of my dad's buddies, and he had his woman, and she was like an aunt to us. And we went over there. Dad was supposed to pick us up. Well, next thing I know, he came back through the next day with our clothes, and me, Tyree, Kenny, and Tyrone, we stayed in one room, and then Tracy and Kelly stayed downstairs, and we were there for.
So he abandoned you?
No, he had made arrangements for her to take care of us because he worked nights. And we went from Vernon Jeans to Aunt Mildred.
But Aunt Mildred comes up to pick up our clothes, and they're in a box, and when she picks up this box, and the bottom falls out, everything we have is rotten. Mice is in it and everything.
I was in the 3rd grade. I started school at Moulton Elementary School.
When you was with Aunt Mildred?
Yeah, when I was with Aunt Mildred. And I think that's the first time I lived in a neighborhood where you had to look for white people. It was really violent. We weren't there for a couple of weeks, and there was a kid that got killed, and they found him in some bushes. There was Mr. Bumpus right next door there. He had a bootlegging joint. Then down the street on 12th and Enos, or is it Ascension? Maybe it was 12th and Ascension. Where Mission Temple used to be? That street right around the corner, is that Enos or Ascension? Because it's Enos, Ascension, okay, 12th and Ascension. There was this couple, I forget their names, but every weekend they would get drunk and go to fighting, and she would cut him up. And I remember walking one Friday evening going to church, he's standing out in the front yard waiting on the police to come, bleeding. And I remember his whole chin had a big globule of blood, and he was cut all up, and she was standing on the steps because they had a closed-in front porch. She was standing on the steps with a butcher knife and a beer in her hand, cussing him out.
Whoa.
That was normal.
Wow.
Across the street, my dad's 3rd wife's mother lived. Evelyn, I don't remember Miss Cooper's first name, but her and this guy named Roscoe lived, and later on, within 2 years after that, those two got into a fight, and she pulled a pistol on him and shot at him, and he ducked back in the bedroom, grabbed a shotgun, and she turned to the side to run, and he shot her, and close range, and with a shotgun. What I've been told, I never really seeing it, but that it blew her breast clean off. And that was our introduction to the block.
But they did the best they could by both of us. You know, I always say she's the one who had the least but gave the most. But all the mama's family did things. They bought us coats when they could. They bought things when they could. So we got better. Mom got better. We moved out from Aunt Mildred, so we moved back with Mom. Still not understanding what Mama has. We moved over on 8th Street. We weren't there more than a year, and it starts up again.
This is the duplex?
This is in the apartment
Okay.
on 8th Street. Bipolar is both sides of the equation, so she's probably depressed a lot, and she probably doesn't want to get out of bed. And it doesn't help for Dad and them to scream and holler at you because people don't understand. They think that if you have mental illness, they think if they scream and holler at you enough, it's going to shake you out of it. But it is a chemical imbalance. It's a chemical imbalance in your brain. It's a neurotransmitter chemical imbalance. That means that for whatever reason, that your norepinephrine, your dopamine, or your pseudoephedrine is out of whack. So we understand now that if we take the right medications, we can bring those levels up to where they need to be. Back then they didn't understand. But now, if you see somebody ever hollering at a person that has mental illness, it'd be like telling somebody who has diabetes, well, kick yourself in the side and make your dang pancreas start working again. And that's foolish. You know, don't be using that insulin. You know, it's all in your mind. All you do is just pray about it and think about it, and things will be better. And that's foolish. God has allowed scientists to open up these doors and these layers and peel back this mystery called the human body. So now we have better drugs. So now when somebody has mental illness, which like my mom had at that time, and they know how to make different cocktails for different patients, they didn't know at that time for her. By that time I was singing in church. And for some reason, God gave me a gift of singing back then. And maybe because we had so much heartache, that at least, you know, I just sang like crazy because I was hurt. So, which was great. Now we got a chance to travel all over the country and sing with a choir, and it was fun. It was so bad at home that when we used to go off on these trips and go to Kansas City or go to Chicago, wherever we went, I would pray that the bus would break down so I wouldn't have to go through that hell.
Back at Mom's.
Back at Mom's house. So then I would also question myself too. It's like, man, this whole religion thing, is this stuff really real? Because I'm going through hell and it ain't like nobody's helping me. She got mugged again, got her purse taken with her check in it. We got, and at that time, she was beating the hell out of me again then. And it wasn't her, you know, she was just frustrated. Plus she was sick. And they didn't understand, we didn't understand. And the medication they gave wasn't the right medication. So what happened was, you know, we just were out there. And Dad wasn't nowhere around at this time. But Mom was gone. They took her and put her in the hospital.
Now, was she committed?
Yeah, she was committed.
So when you say they, you mean the sheriffs?
Yeah, the sheriffs.
They got a
came
court
and got
order.
her. Court order. Sheriffs came and put her in the hospital. And I guess I kind of figured I'd pop up somewhere. And so at that time,
How'd you feel?
terrible. They came to me and said, well, you are the oldest. We want to turn the respirator off. And they didn't see any brain activity. I remember I was crying, and Bishop came up and we prayed for Dad, and Stephen came with me every day. He stayed with me every single day when I went to go see Dad. Well, Aunt Mary came along, but Aunt Mary was known for taking the money and run. And they kept coming, you know, they were like pressuring me, and I just I'm trying to sign
unplug
my rights away.
Okay.
No, not to. By this time, after I made that prayer, Dad, when Bishop prayed over him, they got brain activity, but he couldn't make any decisions because he was in a coma for 4 weeks. So they wanted me to sign everything over to them, so they would take over. Well, they were like all over me. So Bishop had told him, hey, look, so they started arguing with Bishop, and they were arguing, and Mildred wasn't there. Man, Mildred would have been there, that'd been the end of that. So I called Uncle Virgil. That brother brought that, they had a purple Continental.
Remember that?
I seen that thing flying down the, that's on the east side, we're on the west side. That thing, I bet it took him probably about 5 minutes. That thing's driving down alley at Mildred's house. As soon as he turns sideways, jumps out and starts pointing and screaming, man, Uncle George scared to death. Well, that big man, he's about 6'6".
Yes, he was.
That big man. And George jumped in the car, damn near left man Mary. And said, don't you ever. He looked at me in front of him and said, Terry, if you ever have any problems, you're 17 years old. It's early, but now you're a man. You want to take care of this yourself. You have any problems with anybody, I don't care who it is, you call me. Shoot, I had no more problems out there. They didn't even talk to me no more. But you know what? I mean, every time it seems like I'm about ready to get out, something bad would happen. About ready to get out, something bad would happen. But I mean, it just happens. I mean, that's just the way it is. You can't pick your life.
Amazingly, Mom started taking her medicine consistently and became very stable. She started receiving SSI that would be tied to biweekly Prolixin shots. That meant a stable income each month. She worked part-time as a teacher at a daycare center. Finally, she was in control of her life, raising her children and managing her own money. Life was finally back on track for us. No more moving from place to place, transferring from school to school. We can finally see Mom on a regular basis and not have to worry if she'll be taken away and committed. Although the threat of her relapsing always crossed our minds. But this was a time for rest, peace, discovery, and recovery. Us kids would affectionately call it the 7-year bliss.
7 years when Mom was...
When I just started school at Hoover High School. I was a sophomore in high school. Mom got out of the hospital, about 3 or 4 weeks after school, three or 4 weeks after school started. And we moved to, over on Pleasant. Was that 1701, 1901 Pleasant?
1901.
1901 Pleasant. And that was cool. Tyree started showing promise in football at Tech High School, and actually he was continuing. He was a hell of an athlete. I went out to Hoover because I could sing, and it was cool. For 7 years we lived normally. By the January, Mom bought a car. It was a 1973 four-door Gran Torino with a vinyl top, lime green body, and avocado green interior. And we really began to live normal. We had made some friends through a friend of mine and teacher Steve Hansen, and start attending this white church, and we did stuff with them. We started hunting again. Hadn't hunted since we were kids with Dad. Going to school regular, getting decent grades. Started living normal, going to parties. Things were normal. We moved around a little bit.
Why was it normal?
Mom was there all the time.
But that means she went to get her stayed on her medicine.
Yeah, there's several things that happened. She got on. She was able to get Social Security disability, SSI. So that was a normal income, and she was able to keep a part-time job, which gave her, we were able to get furniture, and every time she went to the hospital, she lost everything. And every time she had to start all over. Well, the difference with this time is her income, she didn't completely lose her income, and she was able, she came out and was able to get enough money to do several things. She was able to refurnish the apartment without stressing herself out. They had changed her medicine so that she had to get a shot every 3 months.
What was
I want to say it was Prolixin, and then she took lithium and something else for the side effects. And she, for the next 4 years solid, until well into my sophomore year in college, we did well. You know, by the time you were in junior high and high school, we actually started experiencing normal family stuff and conversations about college. You know, it was never, I can honestly say, there was never a conversation about if we were going to college, even when it was horrible. We always knew we were going to college. Never knew how it was going to be paid for, but we always knew we were going. And about in that time is when she got healthy and stayed healthy. And we weren't I didn't feel so much like we were the family charity case after that. We were, you know, and we did normal things. Like I said, my brother and I were able to go hang out. We'd spent some time living with my dad, so we were already my brother and I were kind of managed as far as things that high school kids did. We'd been doing them since junior high, as far as clubbing and that sort of thing, but both of us had part-time jobs. We went to school, we played sports, had girlfriends, went to parties, had guys come over. Finally, we were able to, once we got that car, we were able to go visit our other cousins and hang out. So, you know, it was finally normalcy. You know, when again, my brother started excelling in school. I was able to do some things that got me both positive and negative attention. But I got to act like a regular kid for once, and probably did some extreme shit, but it was fun. So, you know, and then that lasted till should have been my junior year in college.
It's easy to say, what a tragic story. A black woman from the country sticks who was educated to educate others, who gained the American dream in a time where it was not a norm. She defied the status quo. She was a woman before her time. And to be struck down by a disease of mental illness that was considered taboo, a shameful disease because it was so misunderstood. It was misdiagnosed, mishandled, over-medicated, or under-medicated. Or you can say this story was very triumphant, victorious. This woman was very strong. She had an intestinal fortitude that was undescribable. Her willpower was so strong. She taught so many through her life, but the majority of her students were not in her classroom. They were her children, her grandchildren, her great-grand, nieces, nephews, her sisters and brothers, the doctors, the nurses, her friends. She would say, no matter what they, meaning society, take away, they can't take away your self-worth, and don't let them.
She was very articulate, very intelligent, and when you're dealing with somebody, that's when you knew that when this whole schizophrenia thing, most people who have schizophrenia usually shows their late teens or early 20s. Then after it shows, at that time, they're institutionalized, and usually we didn't understand some of the drugs that they had, but they didn't know how to prescribe them, and didn't know the right amount, and they didn't have newer drugs. So if you were schizophrenic, you would never graduate from college, and even if you did graduate from college, you would never taught as long as you did. Not and conduct classes without somebody seeing something.
So you believe she was misdiagnosed?
Oh, she was totally misdiagnosed. She never had schizophrenia.
Yeah, me and Grandma. When I was a kid, we used to go to Des Moines to visit my grandma, and she would always be in this little apartment area where we could see most of downtown Des Moines. I would usually spend the night with her, and had a fun time with her. Usually she would always tell me the story of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, and when I was a kid, we went to bed, I couldn't sleep, she would always tell me the story, and when she got to the Three Bears, she would go, somebody's been sleeping in my bed, and she'd go to the Mother Bear, she'd say, someone's been sleeping in my bed, and she would go to the Baby Bear, and she'd go, someone's been sleeping in my bed, and here she is! And that would scare me, and I would love that all the time. It used to make me laugh.
All right. One thing that I can say for sure that I learned from Mrs. Wagner was, number one, how to shoot a layup, how to shoot a jump shot. I remember her coming up and showing me the proper way to complete a layup because I was not very athletic in basketball, and she was very patient with me. She took me out behind our apartment complex to the play area, and we shot layups I don't know how many times. Also, on a more serious note, I did learn the value of hard work, perseverance, and how to be a strong woman from Mrs. Wagner, and for that I am forever grateful.
How has my mother's illness affected me? Some people think it hasn't affected me at all, but I think it's affected me tremendously in the things that I do, the way that I am, the feelings I feel. I'm much more sensitive to people with mental illnesses. I'm much more sensitive to families who are in denial of someone who has mental illness. And I think on the whole, it's affected me where I make sure that everybody in my family is aware of mental illness. Some things that may seem a little odd or a little funny to somebody else is really serious and needs to be actually researched and maybe something should be done about it. As far as personally, I think about it every day. I sometimes wonder what my life would have been if my mother wasn't sick. And I think I might have been a little weaker. I think I'm much stronger because of that, because I had to be. And so little things that bother a lot of people, some problems, really don't bother me, because if you went through the things I went through, it's not that bad when you look at everyday life. So I think it's made me stronger. Hopefully it made me a better person. Maybe made me maybe not the best father I could be, but it's far better than what I had. So, but besides that, it wasn't all bad, and it wasn't all good. So everything came out pretty okay. I mean, we all graduated from college. We, no one else in my family can say that. We all have pretty good jobs, or at least had pretty good jobs. We are still here. So that's pretty much it.
Probably one of the major things I remember about Mrs. Wagner is learning perseverance, and she did that by demonstration. She did things under some of the most insurmountable odds, and she put 3 children through college by demonstrating to them how important it was. And I guess one of the funnest things I ever learned from her is when we learned how to cut a chicken for the first time in my life.
The greatest lesson that Miss Gladys taught me was the love that she had for her children. She was sane enough to consistently show the love for her children. She was sane enough to be at all 3 of her children's high school graduations and college graduations. I knew Miss Gladys way back when I was in elementary school, and I was able to continue the relationship up until she left this earth. I learned perseverance through her as well. There are many lessons that I learned through Miss Gladys even after my mom passed away. So even indirectly through Bobby, her daughter, I learned lessons through her. So Miss Gladys was just a strong person. She was a no-nonsense person, but she was a woman of steel and velvet. She was strong, but she was soft as velvet. And you would have to get close to her to figure that out. She was a wonderful lady.
The greatest lesson that Grandma ever taught me was perseverance, courage, strength, never to give up and keep fighting no matter what state you're in.
What was the greatest lesson that Grandma taught me? And I would have to say 2 things. One would be strength and the importance of education. She was a fighter, and she knew what she knew, and she was proud of that, and she was always encouraging us to continue in our education. She was so happy that I went to Fisk University, and she told people, and she always remembered that, and she asked me how school was going, and just was very encouraging about my educational pursuits. And I mean, she was amazing. She is one of the smartest people that I've ever met. And she just knew so much about a lot of different things. But no matter how sick she was, she remembered that I went to Fisk University and that at any given time, her own educational background, the things that she did as a teacher, students she had, could come back to her and she could talk about them fluidly. And I think that showed her strength. And I mean, to the very end, she fought, and she was just amazing. So I think that would be my answer, that she was all about education, and that she was one of the strongest people that I know. And I think the takeaway message was that education is yours. No one can ever take that away from you. What you know, and that's just it.
To answer the question, how has mom's illness affected me? It's really simple. It made me attempt to be totally aware of how I am, mental health wise. I find myself constantly anxious about some of the things that I seen my mom do while she was ill, talking to herself, that sort of thing. I pay an inordinate amount of attention to people's behavior, including my own.
So my mom, I've always received hand-me-downs or used someone else's. Nothing was ever mine. So my mom, when I was 9 years old, went out to Montgomery Wards and bought me this Pink Canopy bed, and it was so beautiful. It was gorgeous. I was so proud of this bed. I got my friends from the neighborhood to come in and look at this bed so I can brag on my bed. And then later on, Mom relapsed, and the sheriffs picked her up, and no one was home to lock the door. So when I came home from school, Mom usually stands outside, and she wasn't there to greet me. I went to the apartment, and the door was opened the door, and our house was ransacked. And I went to the bedroom, and just the top part, the canopy, was gone. Someone had stolen the Pink Canopy. And that hurt me so, because it was big to me, it was dear to me, and it reminded me of losing something. Nothing ever was mine. Didn't get used to anything because I was used to it leaving me. Like my mom, she was there one minute and then she's gone the next. And it's just something you don't get used to anything because you know it's going to leave.
Wow, that's really deep.